I heard he was a mute, and the clapping is how he communicates.
I heard he's a ghost, and the clapping is how he gets your attention.
I heard you were both big old babies who'll believe in anything. Daryl and Gary looked up incredulously at me as I grinned at them from across the lunch table.
Oh yeah? Well, he's been linked to the disappearance of like 4 kids now, so it sounds like a pretty good reason to be afraid of him.
Daryl said, sounding mad. I just shrugged at him, popping a french fry in my mouth and savoring the salt. There's no proof that this clapping man is responsible for a candy bar going missing at Dale's, let alone Mickey Frazier getting snatched. The clapping man was a story of something that had been circulating for a while. 3 young kids gone missing first, all of them headed home from somewhere or another, and one of the witnesses had reported hearing a clapping sound before they had gone missing. One of them had even reported seeing a man-sized shape in the woods before hearing the clap. They didn't have any details about the guy, but they said it looked like a person's shadow with long arms. Mickey had been the most recent disappearance and the one that made the cops around Tiger the most nervous. The first 3 had been younger kids, elementary school kids who ain't looked like much. But Mickey had been a 17-year-old farm kid who was built like a linebacker. The story was that he was trying to find one of his dad's missing sheep around dusk and just never came back. And the stories were he was near a kindle-covered bridge and that the sheep had been found dead underneath it the next day. There were the usual rumors that Mickey had run off and left to be with the girl, left to be with the boy for all they knew. But those of us who had known Mickey kind of doubted it. Mickey was slow. Not like special ed slow, but he was slower than average. He loved his family. He loved working on his parents' farm, and the thought that he'd just run off when he couldn't come back with the sheep was laughable. Mickey liked football too, but if his dad asked, he'd have given it up in a heartbeat. The cops knew this too, and that's why they were so sure that Mickey had been taken by someone, and that someone had to be big. The bell rang, but then we kept our seats as the good little sheep dispersed around us. We'd leave when the monitor finally told us we had to, and not a minute before. Gary still looked a little nervous as the cafeteria cleared out, but Daryl was pretty used to this. Daryl and me, we had been hellions since we was young. But that was a life that Gary was slowly getting used to. I'm not a bad kid, not really. I loved my mama, I respected my daddy, I kept my truck well maintained, and I'm good to my girl when I got one. That being said, I ain't got no time for weakness of rules. The only rule I know is that the strong rule, and it's a rule I learned from my daddy. If I'm strong, and I am, I should be able to do what I want. If other kids don't understand that, well, that's their problem. Just like when I push them down to show them who's boss. Daryl, Gary, and me never really considered ourselves a gang or anything, but we pal around because we all believe that when you're strong, you're right. Miss Gladys looked our way, and I grinned at her as I waved. Miss Gladys is cute, but she ain't strong. She teaches home ec and drives a Spark. Nothing about that says strong. She come over before and tried to talk nice to us and get us back on the straight and narrow, but it never does any good. Eventually, she stopped trying, and when she turned and called for Mr. Gersh, the shop teacher, we took our feet off the table and started heading to class. Gersh was strong, 8-year combat vet with scars to prove it, and he was not to be messed with. We were halfway to class when the bell rang for the start of 5th period, and I looked at the boys and told them I thought maybe we should take the rest of the day off.
Man, I gotta get to math.
Gary said.
If I don't keep up at least a C, they gonna kick me off the football team.
Same.
Daryl said with a sigh.
If I don't pass that history test today, my mom says I can't run the Riz this weekend. Come on, man, just come to class with us. The business will be there after school.
I blew a big old raspberry at them, and I told them that if they wanted to be pansies, then I'd go drink it all up before they got there. They begged me not to, but I was done for the day. School had never really held any appeal for me, and I already figured I'd drop out at the end of the year, so I'd go hauling lumber like my uncle, or into farming like my dad. I was too dumb for the army, too lazy for college, but at least I figured it out a year before everyone else. Have fun in math class then, I said, waving as I walked to the parking lot to get my truck. The little Ford Ranger Daddy had given me wasn't much, but it was fine for now. I really wanted one of them big F-350s like my uncle had, but I'd either have to save up a bunch of money or steal one to have something that nice. The Ranger was fine, and I slunk out of the lot in low gear before turning and flying up the road for home. The dirt roads of Tiger were like a second home for me, and as I put the schoolhouse behind me, I thought again about just leaving on one of them for parts unknown. What was out here really for me? A dead-end job and a nagging wife, squalling kids and a mortgage I couldn't pay. How about a bottle of beer after work with the boys and a loveless marriage that would hang like a shackle around my neck? Maybe a trip to Stragview if I wasn't careful, or a telephone pole in the night if I had one too many beers. I didn't like to think too much about the future then, preferring to live in the moment, and this particular moment was about to contain a 12-pack of beer. I pulled in behind the barn so Daddy wouldn't see me if he came home early. Daddy was at the farmer's market till about 4 selling his wares, and I figured he wouldn't be the wiser for me cutting school. I walked off into the field of peanuts, this year's crop, and on to the woods beyond. I had been exploring the woods since before I was potty trained, and the spot I knew of was about a mile back in the old tangle of trees. Daryl and me had found it when we were still small enough to squeeze between the roots of the snacker trees and to make a clubhouse down there. And now it served as a spot for us to drink and smoke and bring girls to for some privacy. The forest was familiar, an old friend that had protected me sometimes when Daddy had a little too much to drink, and before I knew it I could see the old grove of trees in the distance. Most of the forest was thick old oaks and some scraggly little pulp trees, but the grove was different. It was old, felt ancient somehow, and being there made me feel peaceful like none could hurt me while I was there. I got to the snacker trees and took a seat on the comfy old roots that stuck above the ground, reaching into the gnarled old root system and pulled out a 12-pack of Budweiser. I cracked the first can and drank it quickly, smacking my lips as the crisp taste filled my stomach. This was the good life right here, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. I'd have to trade this carefree time for adulthood soon, and the thought of saying goodbye to the snacky tree grove was a little sad. I opened the second one, drinking it slower this time, and as the wind rustled the leaves around me, I felt a yawn creeping up my throat. Daddy and me had been splitting wood before school today and in the early morning, and that lukewarm beer was starting to make me groggy. As the second one disappeared and the third one popped open, I got comfy and watched the dragonflies and little forest animals frolic in the boughs of the tree. I felt at ease like I was floating, and when the beer can slipped out my hand and fell into the nest of roots, I was snowing before it ever dumped its delicious contents on the ground. When I woke up, it was dark, and the sound of birds and squirrels had been replaced with insects and the scamper of bats. This didn't immediately put me off. I'd been in the woods at night before. Daryl and me had camped out tons of times, and I even slept a rough time or two if Mom and Daddy were fighting. I pulled myself out of the tangle of roots and wobbled a little before getting my bearings. I wasn't drunk, not a long shot, or hungover. I had taken a long nap in the woods, and now it was time to go home and face the music. The school would have called by now and told them I left early, and Daddy would have been looking for me doing evening chores and not found me. And those things would have accumulated in him having a drink as he waited for me, so I was likely in for a bad time. I walked out the grove, watching my step as I went, and that was when I first heard it. A loud pop that made me freeze in place and listen like a spooked deer. I stopped for a count of 5, waiting for it to come again so I could identify it, but all I heard was the quiet sounds of the evening woods. I started walking again, but after 5 more steps, I heard the loud pop again. I had thought it might be a tree branch cracking at first, but now it sounded more like something familiar. It wasn't a natural sound, not like a branch breaking or rocks bumping as they fell. This was a sound I hadn't really heard out here before. A sound I was familiar with, but seemed alien out here. It sounded like someone bringing their hands together for a single hard clap. I kept walking towards the house, thinking I was hearing things, but the longer I went, the more I heard the clapping sound. It was infrequent, always that one loud pop, and when I looked, there was nothing I could find that would have made it. The longer I walked, the more freaked out I got at the popping. I found myself looking for man shapes in the woods, thinking about what the kids had told the cops. It was big, like someone's shadow standing in the woods. Its arms were longer than usual, and they had heard a loud clapping sound before their friends had disappeared. I stopped again. It had been closer this time. It sounded like it was about 20 feet away, and the clap had silenced many of the forest creatures that had been buzzing placidly. I wanted to run, but I made myself walk so I didn't trip in a hole or knock myself unconscious with the low-hanging branch. There was also the fact that these were my woods. Nothing bad could happen to me in my woods. No one could hurt me here. No one would dare to. Now it was closer, 10 feet or better. It was following me, and I was still a half-mile from home. I wondered how far it would let me get before it snatched me up. Would they find any evidence that I had been alive? Would they ever find anything? I quickened my pace. Holes be damned. I needed to go. I needed to get out of here. I needed to be behind the door with the lock thrown and the bolt pushed in. I'd hug my daddy and tell him I was sorry and take whatever punishment came, but I needed to know that the monster or freak or whatever it was outside, and it couldn't get me. I ducked behind a branch and I saw a vague outline and kept moving. The popping had stopped for now, but I knew I wasn't safe. I had to get home. I had to get. I turned my head in the direction of the sound, and there he was, a man-shaped, that was for sure. He looked like a bulky man, his arms and legs just thick outlines in the muck. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them on me. He didn't make a sound, but the longer I stayed still, the more I began to hear a low murmur like a TV show trying to break through the static. I thought he might be frozen by my stare, but as I watched, he raised his hands slowly and brought them together with a single hard clap. I took off like a shot. I ran and I ran and I ran as the poppin' followed me. I expected that every step would be my last. A claw would come out or a set of teeth would clamp down on me, and I'd be dragged away to whatever served as his den for digestion or God knows what else. The popping started coming from directly behind me, and I could almost feel the air of those massive hands. I could see lights coming into view up ahead, and I thought I might have just gotten turned around and found the highway. I didn't care. I just wanted someone to help me escape this creature. I wasn't choosy about who. I broke through the tree line to discover that I'd come out on the edge of my parents' farm, and the lights were flashlights as people looked for me. They was calling my name as they got closer to the woods, and I tore off towards the field in an attempt to stop them from entering. One of them could have easily just been this thing's next meal, and I wasn't about to draw them to it. I found my daddy first. His beam turned to fix to me, and he wrapped me in a hug as he recognized me.
Goddamn, boy. I was scared you'd been took.
He hugged me close, the first time I ever seen my daddy show that kind of emotion. And when he called out to them that he had found me, I saw them all start heading towards his direction. The police came and talked to me, and I don't know if they took me seriously or not. They did tell people to stay out the woods for a while and to listen for clapping if they was alone. Mickey was the last kid to go missing in Tiger that year, and when the clapping has come back after that, they seemed better prepared for it. That experience changed me, and I'm glad to say it was for the better. I started taking my schooling a little bit more seriously, stopping being so impetuous, started helping people instead of taking, and changed my way of thinking a lot. I still believe that strong people are important, but now I also believe they have responsibility to help those who ain't strong. I started volunteering to go out on woodland rescues, searching for people who gotten lost or look for remains. And I got approached by the park services to see if I wanted to work with them. Now I help educate people so they don't get lost, and I help find those who do go missing. In a way, I guess I owe the Clapping Man a debt. He saved me that night from becoming a monster too, though I doubt that was his intention.